of people today are on what we call like the left side of the model, which is follower directed, and they just want to delegate. They don't want to be classified as a micromanager. They want to be like the nice boss that everyone loves because they give you complete autonomy. And that's great, except for when you don't know how to do something and you're feeling insecure, or vice versa.
Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Suzie Bishop joining us. Suzie is Vice President of Product Development at the Center for Leadership Studies. I'm so excited to have Suzie on the show today. That is the global home of the original Situational Leadership Model. Suzie is a Marshall Goldsmith 100 coach and a certified stakeholder-centered coach, and most importantly, co-author with Sam Shriver of the brand new book, Situational Leadership, the Model for Leading Others, Navigating Change, and Unlocking Performance, which just released. So welcome to the show, Suzie.
Thank you, Andy. It is so great to be here today. I am so appreciative to be with you.
Well, let us create something really valuable and impactful for our listeners. And let's start with the elevator pitch version of your story.
Yeah, so I think I had the privilege of being surrounded by leaders throughout my whole life, recognized the strong women in my life, had great coaches, great mentors, great teachers. But I was actually going in a journalism route throughout my career and got super excited to tell my family, like, all right, I'm going to be on screen and I'm going to be traveling and doing these things. And they said, well, would you be interested in working at the Center for Leadership Studies? So there's some foundation, legacy, and family ties there. But at the time, our founder, my grandfather, was diagnosed with cancer in 2012 and wanted his legacy to continue on. And my parents, who had been in the custom training business for over 25 years, were being asked to join their company with the Center for Leadership Studies. And I was asked to stay for a year. And here I am almost 14 years later. I've worn marketing hats, event hats. I've worked with our global partners all over the world in product development and thought leadership and publishing. So have had the privilege of wearing so many different hats and having so many experiences under one umbrella. So it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, that's a great family and business story. So thank you for sharing that. One event in your life that just put rocket boosters under your career, what would that be?
I think besides that, because I do acknowledge how that door just opened,
Yep.
the year I was graduating from school, I thought, yay, I got the big job. Aren't you so proud? I did what I was supposed to do. I graduated with a job offer. But in 2017, I went to an event of Marshall Goldsmith, and I saw Frances Hesselbein, the former CEO of the Girl Scouts, speaking at the event. And right as she walked off stage, she crossed my path and said, I want to learn about you. Like, what's your name? Like, somehow out of this whole crowd, we just made eye contact. And from there, I mean, she's one of the greatest leaders of all time, won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And when I got that opportunity and that door opened, I just kept pushing it and following up and saying, how can we do thought leadership together? How can I kind of make an impact in that space? And that led me to learning and meeting a lot of other thought leaders in the leadership development world. But she opened a major door for me that led me to the Marshall Goldsmith 100 community. It's now led me to create connections where I can now publish. So she had a huge impact on me in 2017.
Excellent. So let's go to the Center for Leadership Studies.
Yeah.
For listeners who haven't encountered the organization, tell us about the center and really what's the it factor, because there's a lot of leadership development companies out there. So what makes CLS different?
Absolutely. So I think what makes us different is the situational leadership framework. So the fact that our founder, Dr. Paul Hersey, he was a professor and he started with this question of what's the one best leadership style and how do I motivate people? And he was one of the first people who put that together. That's an equation that it's based on the follower and based on how you adapt as a leader. In that situational leadership framework, we were really one of the first training companies out there. He was one of the first people to facilitate in person and to move it online and do train the trainers. So that was in the 60s. But I think what's made the Center for Leadership Studies and who we are now as a leadership development partner, we have our situational leadership curriculum, but we have a whole plethora, a huge curriculum just in leadership development and influence. We customize that training, we translate it, we do executive coaching, we do skills coaching. But what makes us unique is that model. And that model has withstood the test of time because it's all about adapting your leadership. And that couldn't be more relevant today in the climate that we're all working in than it was back then when it was originally published.
Well, let's pull on that thread just a little bit. You've been with CLS for over a decade, helping to modernize the model. Walk our listeners through what modernization has actually looked like in practice. What and a lot of people are wrestling with this, in especially legacy businesses. What does it mean to take a 50-year-old framework and make it relevant for today's leaders without losing the core that you started with?
I think one thing that I've always been fortunate with in my career here is from the very beginning, our founder said, the situational leadership model is the model, but how we teach it is going to change over time. And I've heard differing stories of, thought leaders or those who own IP where they say like, no, this is how we do it. This is how we teach it. This is exactly how I want it to go. And I'm so grateful that I never came up against those barriers. And how you continue to modernize it is not only do I talk to our clients and learners that are facing these leadership challenges every single day, they often influence our trends and what we build in learning. But we have such a great industry that is so focused on learning, evolving, agility. So much of how we modernize it is saying like, what are you actually facing in your organization today? Like, what is the true impact of burnout and how do we address it in our training and how we lead? What is the true impact of retention and leaders and employees not being as loyal to organizations now as they were in the past? How do you plan through that? How do you lead through that? AI and technology changes. Like, how does that influence your day to day life? Like, getting in those conversations and not just naming those trends, but how they truly impact the organization. That's data, that's information that we can pull into the conversations and the training that we provide. I also think, just making learning accessible to all, that was a huge initiative that my team took on. That's also modernization. Making sure that leaders going through your courses, your training can see themselves and it's accessible to them, whether hearing sight impaired, whether that's a modality, whether that's a language. I felt like a huge, again, initiative for me coming into an organization where there was legacy and being in product development was making sure that I could make it accessible to as many leaders as possible.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is talk to the customer, and
Yeah.
that universal principle of get close to the work, talk to the customer, talk to the folks on the front lines who are actually consuming the product. That that is a age-old principle
That
that
101,
has
yeah.
stood the test of time, for sure.
I think too, like, the beauty of being in our industry is like, well, who's your typical client or who's your perfect client? Like, well, I mean, it could be a really small shop to the largest global organizations in the world. It can be healthcare, manufacturing. It can be so many different industries because everyone needs leadership. So I also think the diversity of voice that we get to pull from really helps us in terms of modernization in the products that we put out.
Yeah, that being having that breadth is a real asset of the business, and access to that data. I got to imagine that's really valuable. Suzie, let's talk about your new book, Situational Leadership: The Model for Leading Others, Navigating Change, and Unlocking Performance. Why write the book now, and what should listeners expect to take away from it that's different from what they might already know about situational leadership?
I think for us, again, the pandemic was a real turning point for the organization in terms of actually taking it as an opportunity to say everything's changing anyways, from in-person training to going virtual, and now we're kind of back again in that route. But we went through such an innovative period during that time where we truly updated our situational approach to leadership, to flattening organizations, to peer to peer leadership, like a lot of those trends that we talked about, how to take situational leadership and apply it to trust, or how to get into difficult conversations or navigate change. We developed so much curriculum from the pandemic to now. And so we felt like now that we've kind of updated our perspective and we've modernized all these products, kind of the one modality, the accessibility piece that we felt like we didn't have was so many people read books and become better leaders rather than going through training. A lot of them don't even know this industry exists. And so I felt like we needed to pivot in a direction as well where a book would be the thing that made situational leadership more accessible to those who don't go through a traditional training or, learning department. So I that like that's kind of the honest answer. But also I feel like there is a significant call to leaders today. More people are shying away from like leadership is messy, people are messy. I don't have the best examples of leaders today. Like, tell me again why that should be like my career trajectory where I like want to, scale in the organization and manage people versus just contribute individually. And so the book in that way as well, I hope, is a framework that teaches people how to approach leadership, how to build trust, how to navigate some of these challenges and, work through the change that is inevitable and not going to stop anytime soon. So, yeah, just definitely felt like it was relevant today.
Yeah. So your co-author, Sam, we don't have multiple guests on this show, and so we asked you to come on. If Sam were sitting here with us right now, what's one thing that he might say about the book? What's his primary focus?
I think that he would say relevant then, relevant now, or it's never been more relevant than it is today. Again, to build a model in the 60s that really is more impactful today. I mean, over 15 million managers have gone through training in situational leadership. And the reason that we can do that is because it's about adaptable leadership and it's about the follower and it's about where they are today and how can you adapt your leadership style to help them develop and be successful. I think in a time when it was first created, where it was so much about hierarchy and what the boss says, and I have all the answers, and don't come to me with, problems, come to me with solutions. uh, The fact that the model was created when it was is kind of an interesting, thought in itself. But yes, he would say it's more relevant today than ever, or it was before its time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The agility aspect of what you're working on every day is so important, because sometimes you're a leader, sometimes you're a follower, sometimes you sit in the along that spectrum, and helping people with adaptability, agility, especially as leaders. Because let's be honest, there is a resurgence of my way or the highway directional top-down leadership that we're going through right now. So I agree with your estimation of what Sam would be saying, that
Yeah.
as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. So
I think
thanks
we're
for that.
seeing too so much around self leadership, and we're trying to talk more about self leadership and personal accountability and ownership. Like, it's not just on the leader. There's more than one person involved in this
There is.
equation. And
Yeah.
instead of, sitting back and saying, like, what are you going to do for me? Or, being disgruntled, or it's a conversation. So, also looking at leadership from the aspect of that's not just a top down relationship. There's more to it than that.
Yeah. Well, Susie, we're going to take a really short commercial break, and we'll be right back to talk more about situational leadership. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Suzie Bishop talking about situational leadership and the work of developing leaders at every level. Suzie, one of the things CLS emphasizes is that leadership isn't one size fits all, that effective leaders adjust their style based on the readiness of the person in front of them for a particular task. It's deceptively simple in concept, but remarkably hard in practice. Especially that context switching that you're really talking about here. For the mid-level manager listening right now who's struggling because the same coaching approach is landing differently with different team members, what's their first move?
I think recognizing that you have a natural approach, like looking in the mirror and saying, like, how do I typically approach situations? I think that's the first thing, just acknowledging that you have a natural style. And then I think second is reflecting on some conversations that maybe didn't go the way that you wanted them to go, and ask yourself, well, did that have anything to do with how I approached the conversation? So naturally, people are, directive. And if they're directive, it's like, hammer and a nail scenario. Um, a lot of people today are on what we call like the left side of the model, which is follower directed, and they just want to delegate. They don't want to be classified as a micromanager. They want to be like the nice boss that everyone loves because they give you complete autonomy. And that's great, except for when you don't know how to do something and you're feeling insecure, or vice versa. So I think that's kind of the first step, is just this recognition. What is your natural style? And then two, have you been in a conversation recently where you think that natural style might have been the reason why it didn't move forward in a positive manner?
Yeah. So just parroting back a little bit, I'm hearing maybe not full meditation, but certainly self-talk, self-awareness, the ability to have an honest conversation with yourself about how you likely react in a leadership setting. For a lot of people, that's a really hard wall to break down. Is that ability to self-reflect. How would you coach somebody to really truthfully engage with themselves in that self-reflection?
Um, One, this is like the aha moment in any of our trainings. So when we go through an assessment, which is in our training, but also in the book, it's called our lead assessment. It's leadership, effectiveness, and adaptability description. way too wordy. So we call it the lead assessment. But it you do a self-assessment and you do an others assessment, and you go through these scenarios, and it tells you when you use your natural style versus when you're able to adapt. If you don't take an assessment like that, as much self-reflection as you can do is great, but I also think you have to ask. I think you have to ask others, how do I come across? And because most people, they're not intentionally leading you poorly or badly on purpose. So I think sometimes, yes, self reflection is great. You want to have self awareness, but I think that's often built through an assessment, a tool, but it's mostly built through a conversation and like the vulnerability of asking someone, Andy, how do I come across in team calls or in our one on ones or on some of those tasks? Like, am I giving too much or too little? So I think you have to kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah. Suzie, let's do what I like to call our mentorship moment of the day. You've got a frontline manager in front of you right now who has just been promoted from an individual contributor role. They're a high performer technically. They earned the promotion, but they're about to fall flat on their face because they don't yet realize the skills that got them here aren't the skills that will get them there. What's the conversation that you have with what I like to call this accidental manager in their first 30 days?
I loved all your references there, like some CATS model, like technical to human skills to organizational, and also obviously Marshall Goldsmith's work. What got you here won't get you there. But I think if that person's in front of me and I'm working with a group of leaders right now where this is truly the case, is oftentimes you assume that your skill level will transfer to the next group of people or the people that you're supposed to be teaching that technical skill to. So here I'm at this level for, instructional design. And so I've been put in this position because I'm the best instructional designers, and you're holding this new group of people to this standard and skill, like based on your level of understanding. And again, just the recognition that no, you have to bring them up to a certain level. You have to, this is outside of you. This is about them. How can you teach them step by step the way to develop their own skills? Leading someone for a task is so different than doing it yourself. So, what's the conversation that you had when you first started learning, or how can you get to know them individually and their skill level versus making these assumptions that they're exactly where you are? Um, so, again, I think just some of that you've got to ask, you've got to get in dialogue and ask for feedback. And that builds the self awareness so that that individual can lead effectively, given that they just made that leap.
Yeah. And everybody is one size fits them. And we tend to overlay and project our own experience onto everybody else and just, hey, what's the matter with you?
Yeah.
Why can't you do this the way that I do?
Yeah.
I have succumbed to that many
Yeah.
times in my career.
I had a humbling moment this year as a mom where last year was my son's first year in pre-K. And I remember I was so directive, like, okay, get out of the car, carpool, and then this person's going to pick you up here and then walk to the end of the sidewalk because we weren't able to get out of the car. So it was like, do this, then this, then this. So this year I went to go drop him off for kindergarten, and I started doing the same thing. And he was like, Mom, I know. Like, he was like, I've got this. And I was like, oh yeah, like I can't treat you at the same level comfortable to me, or because I still felt, oh, he's so little, he's so young. No, he had developed and moved on. So I want to make sure you don't do that to your people.
So the center published an ebook recently on leadership in the age of artificial intelligence. The subtitle is Continuity Change and the Evolving Role of the Leader. We are in this moment where AI is changing what work looks like, what skills are valued, and arguably what it means to develop people. From your seat, designing learning experiences for leaders around the world, what's actually changing about leadership development right now, and what's staying stubbornly the same?
Yeah. I think what's changing is there's been such a focus now in the age of AI around, of course, adaptability. Most are saying, okay, we want to learn how to use the tools, but how do we just adapt in general to these new environments? How do you make leaders more adaptable? Also think something that's coming about a little bit more is strategic thinking skills and discernment in the age of AI. Yes, we want to use these new tools, new technologies. And I feel like that's the thing that stays the same. AI is a much faster scale and it's more impactful, but we've been hit by technology advances before. So I think there's this what stayed the same is this isn't the first technological advance that we've had to kind of figure out rework, whether it was, you know, the technology we're on now, speaking virtually, whether it was email, whether it was e-learning, like we've adapted before. It's just the pace of it is so fast. And I think the kind of the new thing that seems to be more and more critical is the strategic thinking skills. We used to take more information in as truth, and we didn't have to have this discernment around, is this person that's calling me like here for good or here for evil? Is, this blog post that I'm reading on what's always been a credible site, factual information or potentially one of their resources, pulled together different models and things that actually aren't factual or grounded in what we would hope that you know an organization would put out and get behind. So I think those are some of the fluctuations that we've been looking at.
All right. Well, Susie, thank you so much. We're going to switch to our lightning round. I've got a few fun questions. But before we do that, where can folks get a hold of you?
I would love to connect on LinkedIn, so just Suzie Bishop on LinkedIn, and then our website is situational.com.
Excellent. So, a couple of quick questions. Are you ready? Suzie Bishop, you've just won $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I love the Leader to Leader Institute and what Frances Hesselbein is doing. One, there's so many organizations and passions I have, outside of leadership, but I think just given today's subject matter, giving back in terms of having people see themselves as a leader, being given leader opportunities. And also, I think like young kids being put into situations where they can trust someone and be led if that's not the circumstances that they find themselves in. So I would love to contribute again to someone who also opened some major doors for me as well.
Awesome. Second question, you have access to a really little time machine and can send a message to an earlier version of Suzie Bishop. What's the message and what previous version of yourself do you send it to?
Starting out in my career, I think there's a confidence dip when you're entering a new situation. Um, didn't want to disrupt too much or, speak up in a room that I felt like wasn't my place. Um, and I think just, trusting your gut and going into conversations with curiosity and, genuine care for understanding in dialogue versus maybe holding back because you didn't want to disrupt or, takes time out of someone's day. So I think just having more confidence in the conversations that I was having.
And what previous version do you send that message to?
Entering the workforce.
Entering the workforce.
Yeah. So we're
Excellent.
first couple years entering the workforce. Everyone's there for a reason. You matter. Have confidence in your approach.
Great message. Susie, we're all works in progress. You need leadership development too. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah, I think I tend to take on too much and then be highly directive because I want to make sure that everything goes off, perfectly. And I am surrounded by incredible leaders, incredible team members, and I want to make sure that I'm opening the doors that have been opened for me. And I think you can get bogged down in kind of like the execution mode and checking the boxes. And I think lifting your head up, opening your eyes, and seeing that others are there to walk through the doors as well and give them their opportunities.
Mm. Very self-aware, as I would expect. Very good. Thank you so much, Suzie. Your contributions today have been outstanding.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this so much, Andy, and can't wait to stay connected. And looking forward to the future.
All right, very good. Well, my name is Andy Temte, and this is the Balancing Act Podcast. You can find the show on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public educational good with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and maybe a neighbor. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on The Balancing Act.